At first, everything seemed perfectly normal with Canada's military pilot training pipeline. It was this well-oiled machine that had produced world-class aviators for decades. But right behind the scenes, an escalating mystery was quietly unfolding on the horizon. An entire fleet of aircraft had simply vanished from the active roster, and the implications of this stretched way beyond just a single nation's borders.
It's a massive, critical question that defense officials suddenly found themselves facing. I mean, how exactly do you prepare young aviators to fly the most advanced machines on Earth when their training aircraft are suddenly gone? Well, the answer to this logistical nightmare reveals a huge technological shift that's currently transforming global military aviation.
Welcome back to Air Flight Space, where we explore aviation stories, air safety investigations, industry developments, and the lessons shaping modern flight. Today, we're unpacking an unprecedented capability gap, the cutting-edge technology racing to fill it, and what all of this means for the future of our skies.
So let's look at the timeline here. In June of 2026, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney entered some really high-stakes G7 negotiations with Italy just to rebuild a sovereign training capability that had completely evaporated. To understand why a G7 nation had to sit down at the negotiating table just to get its pilots back in the air, we have to look back. For 24 years, the incredibly reliable BAE Systems CD-155 Hawk served as the absolute backbone of the Royal Canadian Air Force's fighter training. It was a fantastic machine for its era. But when the sustainment contract with flight training provider CAE ended in 2024, the government made a pretty decisive move. That entire Hawk fleet was abruptly retired from service.
But investigators, and honestly anyone paying attention to defense logistics, noticed something really unusual as those Hawks were towed into the hangars for the last time. There were exactly 0 successor aircraft identified to take their place. 0. Typically, in military procurement, you don't retire a critical platform until the new one is parked right there on the tarmac. Yet here, a premier air force was intentionally creating a massive vacuum.
And as you might guess, this escalated into a severe logistical scramble. Without their own jets, Canada was forced to send its newest pilots to flight academies operated by overseas allies. We're talking facilities in the United States, Finland, and Italy, just to keep these pilots in the air and maintain their flight hours. It was an incredibly expensive and complex workaround. So to figure out why a military would intentionally retire its trainers without a backup plan, we have to look at the catalyst. And that catalyst is the Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II. Canada is expecting to field at least 16 of these highly advanced stealth fighters. Now, while the acquisition itself has been hotly debated within Canadian politics, the reality of the F-35 purchase was central to Ottawa's decision. This single aircraft fundamentally changed everything about how a pilot needs to be taught.
Keep this detail in mind, because here's why this matters so much. You simply cannot train a 5th-generation F-35 pilot in a 4th-generation mechanical classroom like the old Hawk. The old way of flying was all about stick and rudder mechanical skills and managing isolated older sensors. But 5th-generation flying, it's entirely different. It is all about sensor fusion, extreme data management, and incredibly complex stealth tactics. A pilot in an F-35 is basically operating a flying supercomputer. Putting them in an analog trainer is literally like teaching someone to program a modern smartphone using a vintage typewriter. It just doesn't work.
And this quote brilliantly illustrates the mindset of military planners at the time. That 2024 retirement wasn't an oversight, and it wasn't a mistake. Officials recognized it as the natural point to just rip off the bandage. The Royal Canadian Air Force acknowledged this global challenge directly, stating they had to transition to a radically new training platform. They desperately needed a flying classroom that matched the digital realities of the modern combat zone. Which brings us right back to the reason Prime Minister Carney was negotiating with Italy in 2026. The Italian-made Leonardo M-346 Block 20 trainer jet. This aircraft isn't just a jet. It's literally a bridge to 5th-generation combat. Canadian pilots had actually already been using these at the International Flight Training School in Sardinia. They were experiencing the specialized technology loaded into that Block 20 configuration firsthand. Things like the cutting-edge all-glass cockpit and the integrated helmet-mounted displays that are designed specifically to mimic the F-35 environment. But the real game-changer here? It's Leonardo's Embedded Tactical Training System, or ETTS. This became a key lesson for investigators and defense analysts alike. You see, you don't need real missiles or highly sensitive, classified radar bolted onto a training jet to teach a pilot how to use them. The ETTS allows the aircraft to emulate these sensors and weapon systems purely through software.
During a 2025 demonstration flight for Flight Global, test pilots showed exactly how this works mid-flight, and it's wild. It effectively turns the aircraft into a flying virtual reality simulator. The software generates simulated air and ground targets all around the plane. The trainee pilot, who is flying a real jet and pulling real G-forces, tracks these virtual threats through their helmet display and executes realistic engagements. You are simulating multi-million-dollar combat scenarios with zero live weapons. It saves incredible amounts of money while providing a perfectly safe, yet highly realistic training environment.
The real-world impact of this technological leap extends far beyond Canada. It's triggered a massive global trend in military aviation. As air forces all around the world upgrade their frontline fighters to the 5th generation, they are all hitting the exact same training bottleneck that Ottawa did. Leonardo has already sold more than 160 of these M-346 jets to over 20 countries around the globe. Today, over 100 examples are currently in frontline service, actively teaching the next generation of aviators how to handle digital-age combat.
Just look at the sheer scale of this adoption. Austria signed a massive €1.5 billion contract for 12 jets, making them the launch customer for the Block 20, with delivery set for 2028. But it's not just governments buying these up. A private flight school in Ontario, Canada ordered their own fleet to provide tactical training for NATO members. Even the United States is heavily involved, with an American-built variant called the Beechcraft M346N emerging as a presumptive finalist to replace the U.S. Navy's aging T-45 Gohawk trainers.
Now, this detail right here would later become incredibly important, and it truly underscores the M346's position in the market. The platform's software-driven, simulation-heavy approach is so dominant and so cost-effective that aerospace giants Lockheed and Boeing actually bowed out of competing for that U.S. Navy contract entirely. When two of the biggest defense contractors in the entire world step aside, it speaks volumes about the shifting landscape of aviation training.
So, what can we actually learn from all this? Why does Canada's procurement scramble, the retirement of the trusty Hawk, and this rapid rise of software-emulated training actually matter to the future of aviation safety and global readiness?
Well, the absolute core takeaway is this. Buying the world's most advanced, multi-million-dollar stealth fighters is entirely useless if your pilots don't have the high-tech, simulated environments required to safely learn how to fly them. The era of analog stick and rudder training is permanently giving way to a new reality where the software in the training jet is just as important as the aerodynamics. Sovereign training capability today means perfectly matching the digital classroom to the extreme complexities of the modern combat zone.
Thanks for watching Air Flight Space. If you found this explainer informative, stay tuned for more aviation investigations, industry developments, and air safety documentaries. We constantly monitor these aerospace trends to bring you the stories that matter most. I'd really love to hear your take on this huge transition to virtual combat training. Share your thoughts below on the M346 and the challenges of 5th-generation pilot preparation, and I'll see you in the next explainer. Keep looking up.